Parents of Reddit, what is the most embarrassing thing your toddler said out loud in public? Disclaimer. This was not my toddler, but a toddler said this to me while I was waiting in the grocery line. I have a vagina and new party shoes. Quote. Really? What else do you need? This was me at age 24. Not really embarrassing, but my son once announced to daycare that I had died. It was a severe shock to them when I picked him up. Now my niece once announced at a family dinner that she wanted to fuck. Loudly. We all turned and looked at this little 3-year-old, and her mother said she'd work on speech therapy with her as she handed her daughter a fork. Edit. As it slowly comes back to me. I think he cried too. Just to underscore the point. It's been almost 13 years, so the memory is hazy. The staff were very distraught. Not as sad. But my daughter announced at daycare that I was pregnant. I showed up and all the teachers were congratulating me. I was most decidedly not pregnant and have no clue why she decided to announce that I was. 4-year-old son was misbehaving in a store, and I told him if he didn't control himself we were going to leave. He escalated, and I picked him up and carried him through the entire store. He was surprisingly putting up little fight. As we pass the checkout lanes he loudly says, "Hey mister, put me down." I didn't hesitate, didn't make eye contact with anyone, just turned beet red and kept marching out the door. Clever boy. During a private Remembrance Day, Armistice Day ceremony with veterans, my 3-year-old soiled her diaper. I changed her in a back room, and when we came out, it was the moment of silence. She slammed the door and yelled to all the vets, "I just had a big poo, and it had peanuts in it." Quote. As a veteran, that would have made my month. I'd be telling everyone about that. That is straight up grunt humor. I would be hating all the sadness until that moment. Then it'd be a great time. Remember people, vets aren't made of glass, even the old or injured ones. We live for gallows humor, dark humor, and fart jokes. Lay it on us. My youngest sibling is 10 plus years my junior, so I grew up with him embarrassing me in public. The worst was around Christmas one year when we went to Walmart after going to a church service. The service was about the virgin birth and how no other virgin had ever had a baby before. My brother was probably about 4 to 5 at the time, so while he didn't know exactly what made someone a virgin, that service taught him virgins couldn't have babies. Anyway, we're in the checkout line and behind us is a woman who is obviously pregnant. My brother points to her and says very loudly, "Look, that lady isn't a virgin. I mean facts." At the grocery store with my boys, 2 and 3. Suddenly, without any context, the 3-year-old broke his silence to scream at the cashier, "Mama's wiener is missing." Quote. Silver? Thank you, kind stranger. Did you ever find it? Later that night, I was in Costco and my son, who was about 5 at the time, ran up to me, grabbed my hand and started pulling me towards the next aisle. Dad, look, real ninjas, whilst pointing at 2 women in full burqas. When I had a mohawk, a little boy once pointed to me and said, "Dinosaur." Quote. That was the best compliment I've ever received. My daughter did the same at Target. Walking down an aisle she screeches and points, "Mommy, look, there are ninjas." Ninjas. That was a fun habit to break. Not me, but my midwife. Pregnant with second child. 3-year-old daughter asks why Mommy's belly is so big. She's told there's a baby in there. She turns to Daddy and asks, "Do you have a baby in there too?" Dad replies gently, "No, I'm just fat." Quote. A few days later in the checkout line, and there's a very large lady behind them in the line. The little girl asks the lady, "Do you have a baby in your tummy like my mummy?" Quote. The lady is kind and just says no she doesn't. To which the girl responds, "Oh, just fat then?" Quote. That's not even roasting, that's just incineration. My daughter is 16 months. When she is done interacting with someone she will dismissively wave her hand and say, "All done. Bye." My wife doesn't like it, but I think it's funny and a total power move. Lol, my son used to do that when anyone would sing. All done. So my younger brother was 5/6 of a year old. My dad was coaching my basketball team, was in 7th grade, and my brother came along to hang out at the practice. Now my brother has Asperger's, so of course at that age social awareness is non-existent. There are a few black kids on the team, and my brother was learning about Martin Luther King Jr. as it was around the time of the holiday, so his brain is processing. During the practice, my brother is standing under the basket as we're doing layup lines. All of a sudden, as one of the black kids goes past him, my brother goes, "Are you an African American?" And my friend chuckles and goes, yeah, and my brother with a completely dead serious face and tone just goes, "I knew it." Whole team was rolling on the floor laughing. Edit. Wowza. I did not expect all this when I posted this story. I told my parents this, and my dad added, as I had forgotten, that when this happened my dad exclaimed, "Nothing gets past my boy." Quote. For those wondering, my brother is now 23, accepting of all races, and also writes and plays for a pretty awesome band. And thank you anonymous Redditors for the silver and gold. My first gold. What a time to be alive. This is my favorite one. My wife had my 3-year-old at the park one day. She decided to pick up some litter to make the park look nicer, so she was throwing away pop bottles, chip bags, etc., and he wanted to help. He stoops to pick up some cigarette butts, and my wife says, "Leave those to mommy." She wasn't going to pick them up, but didn't want him to touch them either. A few minutes later, he has gone to play. He tells another mom, "I'm finding cigarettes for mommy." My wife was so embarrassed and said she got the dirtiest looks from nearby parents who heard this. I was in Target with my 4-year-old boy twins. One has a nervous habit of grabbing his parts. I quietly said to him, "Let go. Hands off, dude," and he yells at the top of his lungs, "But mama, my penis won't go down." I don't think I've ever left Target so fast. My son went through a phase where he would announce when he had a boner. Now he's in a phase where he constantly pinches his nipples. He will not stop. At a fairly nice restaurant, my brother was teasing my daughter, and my daughter screamed at him to stop and threatened to call him the N-word. The N-word was nipple. I nannied for kids for a summer. One time, as soon as the mom came home, the daughter ran to the mom and said, "Jen said the C-word today." I was fucking beyond mortified until the mom and I talked for a second, and I realized that they didn't say crap around the kids. The mom and I laughed it off once we realized. My nephews. "Joe, you said the F-word." Quote. "No, I didn't." Quote. "Yes, you did. You're supposed to say past gas." Quote. At the grocery store, my daughter, who was 2 at the time, and I were about to pass an African-American lady in an aisle. At this point, she had never seen anyone with a darker skin color such as hers. She's about 2 feet from us. So, she sees her, turns to me and yells, while pointing, "Look, Mom, it's a chocolate lady." Quote. I froze for a sec. Said, "Yes, honey. Isn't she beautiful?" Quote. She yells yes, and I practically ran away down the aisle. That poor lady was such a good sport. Edit. Bonus. We met a man with a hook for a hand, and she sprinted up to him to ask him if he was Captain Hook. Face palm. Luckily, he said yes and pretended to run after her. I did something like this. I grew up in the 80s in a small town with very few POC. My dad and I went out for lunch one day, and our waitress was black. I was thrilled. I kept poking my dad and telling him in a loud voice, Dad, it's Roz. Dad. Roz from Night Court is our waitress." He was very embarrassed. Years later, I lived in the same town and had an employee who was a very dark-skinned black man. We worked a Christmas in a retail shop together. One day the store is packed with people and kids, and he says to me, "Wanna see something funny?" And I say, "Sure, of course." He walks by this mom and toddler that she's carrying and waves at the little girl. Her eyes widen and then proceed to follow him around the store, whipping her head around, wide-eyed. She will not let him out of her sight. He comes back over to me and says, "I always can tell when I'm the first black person a kid has seen. It was so cute and magical. I loved this." My son was 2 and thought every black man was his dad. He was away for the military a while, so when we were at Boston Market he called another random stranger daddy, and ran to him and hugged. "Hi monsieur, ha ha ha." The guy actually picked him up and said, "I'm not your dad, but hey buddy." Quote, "I was mortified but couldn't stop laughing. What a dad bro, that is so sweet." When he was being humped by a puppy, and me yelling at the puppy to stop. "Don't yell at him. He loves me." Quote, "I guess he's not wrong." When I was about 5, my grandma's Shih Tzu was humping my leg and the adults were telling him to stop. I yelled, "No, I like it." Quote, "The memory haunts me. I have a story about my sister. This happened back in the 70s and she was about 3 years old. My mom tells this story all the time. She and my mom were in a very long line for the restroom. Monsieur, there was a lady a few people in front of them who was over 300 pounds. My sister yells, 'Mom, isn't that the fattest lady you've ever seen?' Quote, other people in line were doing their best not to laugh and my mom is horribly embarrassed. And then my sister looks at her and asks, 'Isn't she the fattest lady you've ever seen?' Quote, my mom had enough and took my sister out of the line and walked away. You know what though? Props to your mom for taking her out of there. Her bladder control must have been heroic, and once the kid says something like that, the urge to cry is so real. One time my kid pointed out as the pizza delivery man walked up how big his nose was, and without thinking I just blurted out, "So, you've got a bobble head." So my kid got offended and I made the delivery man laugh, but I don't think I taught kid much that day. Oh, that's painful. My 3-year-old did the same in the bus. An obese man took the seat next to us. She was a cute little Shirley Temple, so he smiled at her and said, "Hello." She looked at him for some time and then said, "Tell me, why are you so fat?" Those moments you want the earth to open and swallow you. 0_0. I want to know the answer. My sister, at about age 3, pointed at a large black lady on the bus and loudly exclaimed, "Fat Albert." Quote, my mother was horrified, but thankfully said lady had extraordinary grace and told the loud toddler that yes, she was fat, but she was not Albert. My friend's daughter, approximately 2.5 YO, saw another kid in the grocery store with the toy truck, and out of nowhere says, "I want that fucking truck," in an angry tone. Not the funniest thing to read, I know, but we've been saying that in a baby voice for the last few years and it always cracks us up. My cousin called a wardrobe a fucking wardrobe for around a year. The wardrobe had fallen on her younger sister, thankfully not doing any lasting damage, and her dad, hearing the bang, ran into the room and screamed, "That fucking wardrobe." My cousin assumed that was its correct name. When I was little, under 5, my dad would jokingly ask if I wanted a cold beer. I would always respond with no, until one day when we were in the grocery store, he asked if I wanted anything, to which I replied, "A cold beer," while we were standing in line. I was with a group of friends and was asked if I drink. I said I don't really. And my daughter said, "But mom, you drink all the time." She had no idea the difference between drinking alcohol and drinking everything else. My friend's kid once asked his mom's female friend where her boobs were. The friend had much smaller breasts than his mom. That was certainly awkward for everyone present. A little girl I babysat, maybe 3rd grade at the time, asked me if I even had boobs. I'm a female, B cup, before I could even respond. Her brother, 5th grade, responded, "She does. That's that I guess." When my son was 4, and watched Space Jam, he thought every black man was Michael Jordan. When we would go somewhere, he would point at every black man he saw and yell, "Michael Jordan." Quote, When my sister was little, she saw a man with braids and said, "Look, Daddy, coolio." Quote. Thank you so much for watching and have a good day.